Albania. How many of you have been to Albania? One person? Two people? How many of you know where Albania is? All right, more people. For those of you who don't know where Albania is or have never been, you probably know of some Albanians. For example, Mother Teresa. She was Albanian, she gave the world charity. The Blues Brothers, John and James Belushi, they were also Albanian, and they gave the world great music. But also the medical award winner in Nobel Prize, who invented Viagra, Farid Murad, is also Albanian. But there's other heroes, I think, in our daily lives that are not necessarily Nobel Prize winners. They are not necessarily very famous or win Oscars, but they can make a difference in our cities. I am a mayor of the city of Tirana. It's a city of about 1 million people, and not many people get to be mayors. Let's see if we can work the microphone. Not many people get to be mayors of the city they were born. I happen to be one. Sometimes I read histories from other people, and one of the biographies of President Lyndon Johnson, when he was going through the civil strife in the United States, after President Kennedy was assassinated, he was asked, how does he deal with stress? And he said, I look at myself in the mirror, and I tell myself, Lyndon Johnson, President of the United States, things can be worse. You could be mayor. But things are not so bad. I grew up in a city that really looked like the capital of North Korea. And for many people who've never been to North Korea, Albania was the North Korea of Europe during the Cold War. It was a city of about 170,000 people with only 17 cars, which meant the Politburo of the Communist Party, the leadership of the communists, and only the important generals in the army. Everybody walked and biked, not because of choice, because of poverty. But then things changed. Then the city became one of 1,070,000 people with 170,000 cars, almost overnight. When we were elected to office, it was very exciting. You run a fun campaign full of great energy, and then becomes day one. What do we do now? Where do we start? And this is the city we inherited, a city full of traffic, full of smog, a city full of illegal occupied space, no place for children to play, and you always wonder, where do you start? And usually people who consult politicians say, you have to ask an expert, because experts know everything. And it reminds me of a great joke in a forest where the rabbit was so scared because everybody wanted to eat the rabbit. And because the rabbit was scared, the other animal said, go and ask an expert how to solve this situation. So he went to the owl, the animal with the glasses, sitting in a tree, acting like an expert. He probably went to Harvard or some important school. Owl, how do I deal with fear? And the owl puts his glasses and he says, you know, the reason you're afraid because you're at the bottom of the food chain. If you're up in the food chain, no one eats a lion, for example. So my solution is, you have to become a lion. The rabbit is so happy. He says, I have now found the solution. And then he says, thank you so much, but I have a follow-up question. How do I become a lion? And the owl says, my friend, I'm only in charge of strategic thinking, not project implementation. So when you run a city, everybody tries to tell you about how things get done, but you don't have the billions of euros, you're not a member of the European Union, you don't get outside support. Where do you start? On day one in August 2015, my chief of staff says, Mr. Mayor, we got to be ready for school to start. And I said, great. What is the first thing that starts? Well, kindergartens. I said, wonderful. I don't have children. I don't know what kindergartens look. So then they showed me this picture. This is what kindergarten looked. They looked like prison cells. And I said, no wonder we have so much violence. No wonder we have people who are rude. No wonder we have so much trash in the street. If we are forcing kids to go in kindergartens that look like cells, it cannot be done. And I said, how many kindergartens look like this? And she said, all of them. And then I said, well, let's issue an SOS alarm in the city. We are broke, but let's not resign. Why don't we call every company in the city? Why don't we call every designer, every architect? Why don't we call young students who have energy and who have talent and who want to help? We organized the largest adopt a kindergarten drive one could imagine. And in a matter of several weeks, kindergartens look like this, where everybody showed up. We spent zero money other than the great energy of the city giving back to children. So we started with children first. You know why? Because children are a sentinel species. They're an indicative species. They're a species that pretty much tells you how the ecosystem operates. And children are open to change. I'm a politician. I've run for office several times. In a crowd like this, you ask people, who wants change? Everybody says, I want change. Sounds like a great thing. But then, when you win, you ask people, who wants to change? And people look at, no, have him change first, or have her change first. I'll change later. But children don't say this. Children love change and they love to change. So the response was fantastic. Not only now, we have 11 requests for every one spot in the kindergarten, where before we could barely fill one kindergarten. Everybody was looking at private choices for kindergartens. And then we said, why don't we take a bit further? Why don't we free a lot of the occupied space that people were using with garages for their old or their fancy Mercedeses to appreciate and award the car as a symbol of capitalism rather than open space for children. So we designed a state-of-the-art playground. And we said, we're going to build the best playground in Eastern Europe. It's amazing the resistance to change from adults. In 100 days of constructing this kindergarten, we had 78 violent protests. And my orders were clear. Every day they destroy, every day we build. And every day they destroy, and every day we will build again. And every day they destroy, and every day we will build again. And then people say, oh, okay, Mr. Mayor, we were tired, let's have a referendum. I said, of course, we will have a referendum on day one when it opens. And it looks like this. And I said, who has more children showing up to their rally wins the referendum. This is what it looked at 7 or 8 a.m. in the morning. This is what it looked at 10 a.m. in the morning. The Prime Minister is calling me and he says, my goodness, this is the largest political rally we've ever had of children. Because children respond to change and children love change. And then we said, why don't we build more? Why don't we clear all this space that people are squatting and taking for their cars? And why don't we create a lot more space for children in just about every neighborhood of Tirana? We started a playground revolution. But once you win children, then your political consultants become very unhappy. Because they say, Mr. Mayor, why are you wasting time on people who don't vote, on people who don't pay taxes? Well, funny enough, children became top advocates of the mayor and of the city. When we wanted to start a day without cars in a country that in 2 decades, city moved from 17 cars to 170,000 cars, we almost had a breakdown. Everybody was so angry. They were calling me, they were yelling, they were calling names on social media. We really like this guy, but now these days without cars are a catastrophe. But the only way we could win this battle was when children took over in the street. And they occupied all the highways. It was very difficult to resist this type of change. Not only did we have some wonderful days without cars, but we created a children municipal council in which we decided to turn entire areas of the city car-free. And then the same parents who were complaining were telling me, you have recruited our children into a radical movement. I cannot get in the car because they start to scream. They said, no, it's a day without cars. We need a bike. We need roller skates. We need rollerblades. We need skateboards. He says, what have you done? I haven't used my car for months because my children will go berserk. But it's amazing. This is one of my favorite pictures. When I used to ride a bike, it was really a proud moment to say, Ma, look, no hands. And I think you can see that effect. And then we designed the largest square in the city. And we said, let's take all the cars from the heart of the city and let's do half of it an open square where kids could have a car-free day every day, and half of it a downtown forest. And this is what it looks now, actually a few weeks ago, and will be done in 2 weeks to have one of the largest permanent car-free blocks in a city that was obsessed with a car. The same thing with cleaning. When we ask people, they say, look, let's have a cleanup day, clean Tirana in 1 day. Well, some people say, no, that's your job. You're the mayor. You clean it. I said, no, I can't clean it alone. No, but this is not communism. You cannot force us to volunteer and clean up. But you know what? Children don't complain. They all showed up because they felt the city was theirs and they needed to help out. And then when we decided to introduce the concept that you Europeans have had for a long time, the separation of waste, kids responded first. They got a certificate from the mayor which said they were the official in charge of their house separating waste. So I meet these mothers who are going nuts. It says, what have you done? You know, I am asleep. I want to put a plastic thing in the wrong container. And they wake up and they say, Mother, no, no, that's a crime. Don't do this. In the right container. And the force for change coming from children is absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much. This has been... Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. My last word of advice. We can all be a bit like Peter Pan and create our own little Neverland where we are. And I think by putting children first, we can create probably the best revolutions our cities have seen. Thank you.